Harvard did a study that showed that any investment in health gives a 2,000% return on their money. So people jumping up and down these days about crypto and gold and real estate, look at the return compared to a 2,000% return on your money if you're investing in health. And that's not just money, it's also time.
Our next guest, Jason Gilbert, had his own challenges with back pain starting, I believe, as young as age 7. He grew up in a health food store owned by his family. This led him on a health journey for himself and ultimately for his clients, which even includes a unique connection with elite surfers.
90 to 95% of the money, of all that we'll invest in our health, in our lifetime, it's not invested, by the way, it's spent in the last 5% of our life.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms. Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. If you are looking to avoid spinal surgery, which is not always possible, but is something I believe you should always explore, our next guest, Jason Gilbert, is someone you should listen to. Jason had his own challenges with back pain starting, I believe, as young as age 7. He grew up in a health food store owned by his family. This led him on a health journey for himself and ultimately for his clients, which even includes a unique connection with elite surfers. He has helped tens of thousands with their health journey. He has appeared on television shows and online health summits, and Jason is a sought-after speaker. He is also the author of the book, The Secret to the Healthy Spine, available on Amazon. His vision is to help people live without limitation. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Chris, thank you very much for having me.
So before we jump into your area of expertise, I always like to go back much further back. What was it like growing up, little Jason? I know you're in Australia. Where did you grow up? What were your parents like? Obviously, they owned a health food store, so that's interesting. If there was some event or someone you could pinpoint as the reason you would ultimately become a health-focused speaker, author, facilitator, what or who would that be?
Chris, it's probably a combination of many things. Working in the health food store, which is in Sydney. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, in a place called Manly. That was very influential, because I came in contact with inspiring people every day, particularly elderly people. I've always been fascinated by seeing elderly people who are still rocking it with good posture, active, happy, all the rest, the things we really notice as kids that we're sensitive to. However, my dad, for example, had amazing habits such as making sure that we had water every day. He had warm water. I'm not sure if he knew how important that was, but that got me, on this, a healthy habit as far as hydration in the morning. Also healthy cooking. So all of those things that came from Dad were really important. We look back also, and for me, a pivotal moment was when our school actually introduced health as a subject for about 6 months when I was around 12, which is year 7 here. And our teacher was a very strong rugby player, someone you look up to and admire. And I remember he was talking about the effect of diet. And he put, back then it was diagrams of a healthy artery and the foods associated with that, and also an unhealthy one full of atherosclerotic plaques and the foods associated with that. And straight away I was like, no way, I don't want that. And it actually amazed me way back then, the fact that we could be sick and not know it. We can't see that sort of stuff, so even as a kid, I was aware of the fact that sickness is not based on how we look, or what we know. It's based on our function. And I guess over the years, all of these things combined to come up with that end result of someone who's actually had spinal surgery as well and specialized in helping others avoid it. So it's a combo of things for sure.
Okay. So my understanding is you grew up in an athletic and healthy environment. Can you
Yes.
talk about kind of how you ended up with, spinal surgery? Like, what did that look like? What were you experiencing through this kind of path?
Yeah, and that's really important point, because the problems that we deal with as adults predominantly have a biomechanical cause somewhere, okay? Whether it be an accumulation of years and years of poor posture, falls and accidents that we suffered in childhood, okay, or in our teenage years. And we have to remember that just in the first 5 years, okay, that's with us learning how to walk and suffering the falls associated with that, we suffer more than 2,000 falls. So for a delicate spine, any one of those falls, or many of them, can compromise biomechanical function. So when I started suffering pain, firstly, at a young age, I had no reference. I couldn't remember how it was without pain. It wasn't debilitating enough to put me in extreme, excruciating pain and cry and call my parents' attention. I just thought it was normal, especially when accompanied with running. I used to be a long-distance runner, with surfing, with playing rugby. We play rugby every day after school. And it was just one of those things. I noticed it wasn't there when I was resting, and it was predominant after practicing those sports. What I understand now, which I didn't then, imagine having the wheel of a car that's misaligned, and you're not really feeling too much as soon as you go over the pothole. But after 10,000 kilometres or 20,000 kilometres of driving without aligning that wheel, you're going to start to wear out the tyre. And that's happening without us knowing. So that was my case. That was slowly occurring. Combine that with a job that's very physical. And in Peru, I would take my table up to the Andes or to the Amazon every 2 weeks to one of those places. And my busiest day was 220 people in a day. I worked for 20 hours. But the average is 120 to 150. We're not taught at university to look after our own backs. So I'd be picking people up, bending over and all the rest. And obviously it's a compounding effect. It's like going to a dentist with a cavity and saying, what caused this? Was it the chocolate? Was it, the soda? It's everything. It's a combination of everything to get you to that point.
And so at what age did you really have to kind of succumb and get the spinal surgery? And what did the decline look like that convinced you that you needed to start getting help?
Yeah, so there was a decline, let's say, that wasn't that conscious till about 18 years of age. And that's when I really felt, I sort of felt bent over, and I felt challenged in doing certain things. And that's, as a surfer, I was influenced by other surfers, and there was a world champ at the time, Tom Carroll. He's 3-time world champion, very well known in the surfing world. Tom recommended that I go to a chiropractor. And that same week, we'd had a client in the shop who'd been to a chiropractor and saw me studying a Bachelor of Science. I said, what are you going to do with that? I'm like, I don't know. I like science. He goes, you're going to end up working for the pharmaceutical. I didn't know what that meant. And because of his experience, he said that he basically limped into a chiropractic office, and after 15 minutes, he was fine. I was fascinated by that. So with my own experience, not long after, and what I heard, I thought, chiropractic's for me. But to tell you the truth, I didn't know really what it was about until the end. The passion grew as I was studying. And I guess because I dealt with these crises along the way, okay, as I just mentioned, around 18, it came to a head. I didn't understand also the importance of looking at the underlying cause. So my work earlier on in my career was based upon, let's say, patching it up, an allopathic approach where I'd have clients come in with pain and my magic would help them. When I say that, I'm being facetious because I didn't realize that it's actually the body that's doing the healing. And mate, that led me bit by bit, I guess, until the age of 40. I'm now 55. So the age of 40 to spinal surgery. Yeah. And once again, could it have been avoided? Of course it could have been. And I felt indignant because I was in a Latin American city with 20 million people. That was Sao Paulo, and Lima, Peru, 10 million people. And there were doctors, orthopedic surgeons and neurologists that didn't know me personally, that would send me their patients that they wanted to help avoid surgery. They'd heard about my work, and I'd had amazing success helping people avoid surgery. But my one was too far gone. So there's a couple of parallel experiences here. One was the fact that it humbled me because over the years I'd seen hundreds of unnecessary surgeries. Okay, let's say for an L5-S1 disc or L4, L5 disc, but it was actually a sacroiliac problem. And because we can't diagnostically identify a problem with the sacroiliac joint on an X-ray or MRI, but we can actually see if there's degeneration in a disc. Well, obviously a lot of surgeons look at that and go, that's the reason you're suffering, but it wasn't. So there's many things that would happen that I'd examine the person and go, oh my God, this is not necessary, but anyway. But then my problem was that I'd been kite surfing and I hadn't changed my base. That's where your foot position is for 1 week. And I got on the plane. I was like, I've got a pain in the gluteal area. And I'd fully blown my disc. About a centimetre of the disc went into the spinal canal up, about a centimetre down, and 90% of the spinal cord was obliterated on the MRI. When I say obliterated, it was blocked out. So that was, there was no way I was not getting away with that without having surgery. I tried everything I could for 2 months, even spiritual surgery. And, the benefit was, as I said, I was humbled to understand that, there's cases that are most definitely surgical.
Had to be immensely frustrating, right? Like you're the guy that they go to so that they don't have surgery. You're probably the one who, we bumped into is like, oh, you're thinking about surgery. Don't do it. Like, we got to figure out how not to. And then you get stuck in a situation where you really, really don't have a choice. I can't imagine how frustrating that was. What are some misconceptions that people might have about spinal health?
Well, I think the most important thing in regards to health in general, but particularly spinal health, is that I'm okay because I feel okay. So think about how many people unfortunately wake up feeling great and unfortunately pass away that day due to a cardiovascular problem like a heart attack or a stroke even. That wasn't a problem that appeared that day. That was a pathological process that was occurring. So there's many examples. My mum with lung cancer, she didn't know she had late-stage lung cancer until she coughed up blood. Yeah, she's still alive, thank God. We got her through that. So people would be grossly mistaken to think that they're actually feeling good, so therefore they are good. Really important to understand that. Secondly, let's go back to the example with the car wheels, okay? If we know that we're going over bumps and holes regularly, and we know that that's misaligning the wheel, well, of course, if we're not aligning it regularly, we're going to expect the tires to wear out, especially the wheel that's more misaligned. So the same thing happens in our spine. And that's what I write about in my book, The Secret of the Healthy Spine. Every single day we're doing things that we were never taught to do correctly, whether it be sleep position, how to sit, whether it be to compensate for unilateral sports. Okay, I'm a surfer, but I also play tennis, and those who play golf and other sports that favour certain biomechanical patterns that overload one side more than the other. So these are things that understandably we're not aware of, but we need to be aware of, firstly, to compensate for regularly. The same way we take our car for regular maintenance every 7,000 miles, let's say, okay? And also with the assurance that if we don't, we will pay a higher price later down the track and quite possibly be in a situation where we will be limited for life. And when you're speaking with someone like myself who's worked in spinal care for 30 years, you can actually trust them when they say that it's sad. I've dealt with so many people in their 50s, 60s and 70s that have had a whole life without pain. They'll come with 1 week of pain. And we'll look at their MRI and we'll go, my goodness, there's no disc. I'm not sure whether, if I show you this, but look at that nice, healthy disc there. Look at that, see the nerve roots, so they've got plenty of room there as well. The foramen's open. We get cases like this, severely advanced with almost no disc, complete pressure on the sciatic nerve, let's say, if it's the case of the lower back. And the person will say, the pain just started last week. So please take me seriously on that one, people. If you've never suffered pain, don't wait till it starts.
So I've got to ask this, right? Because I have my own kind of bad experience or potentially embarrassing experience. Do you believe that they were in no pain, or were they actually ignoring pain and just assumed that it was, the whatever pain that they were feeling was normal?
Yeah, really good point. There's a group of people that don't feel anything. Okay. Right. And that's once again, apply that to those processes I mentioned before that lead to a heart attack, a stroke, or lung cancer. However, there's another group that have small, like, signs. Let's say my case, I had manageable pain. I was never advised in regards to what to do when you feel pain, and always work with professionals who use the pain symptom as a way to find the underlying cause. So if we don't have that in our mind, then we won't do anything about it a lot of times, okay? The most recent case, I also work with functional medicine, but one of my clients last week came home from New York, had a testicular pain, but it was manageable, and he thought it was due to a hydrocele that he had years ago. He had testicular cancer. They removed it the next day. So we're not always lucky to get the signs, but please never ignore any signs when you get in them. And there, of course, are others, okay, another group of people that do feel pain, do feel regular crises during their life. And then, unfortunately, whether they're using natural or complementary medicine to deal with it, or pharmaceutical medication to forget about it, they must understand that when you suppress symptoms, you're ignoring an underlying cause. And then you're playing with fire. And that's what I've sadly seen. It's no one's fault. We're just not educated in regards to the importance of finding the underlying cause and dealing with it. So yeah, mate, there's all of those classes of people. Myself, for example, I can deal with pain and symptoms to a point where, hey, I've got a severe disc hernia. You know, where luckily, or other people, you know, a good example, you can cut yourself with have a paper cut, and it's extremely painful. You know, you'll know about it and you'll do something about it. So other people are lucky enough that their pain systems are advising them better than others. And there's many reasons for that.
It's interesting. I asked that because I actually worked on a software, an online symptom checker that was at one point voted the best online symptom checker by Harvard Medical School. So that was a very cool experience. But I went through the process for an Achilles pain that I had, and as I went through the process, it didn't pull up plantar fasciitis, and the orthopedic surgeon who actually put together the algorithm, I sat down with him. I was like, this didn't identify anything. And he, pushed the one spot on the bottom of my heel, which is an indicator of plantar fasciitis. And so we went back and debugged my answers, and it asked, do you have pain in the mornings? And then my initial response was no, but then it dawned on me, yes, I do. Like every single morning at that point, I got up, my first 3 to 5 steps were like a little bit painful, but I didn't even think about that, as I just thought that was normal. And so I screwed up my own analysis of plantar fasciitis. So I'm sure, hey, people really listen to the pains, because, you may just have gotten used to them, and that's not where you want to be.
That's a really good point, mate. I see it all the time. And it's funny, when we understand that pain's a reflex, and that reflex is coordinated by the brain. So let's think of other reflexes. Let's think of hunger. If we feel hungry, our brain is guiding us to eat. If we're feeling tired, it's guiding us to sleep. We don't ignore those reflexes. It would be extremely dangerous to do so. But with back pain, I guess the fact that it's often not stopping us in our tracks, that's another thing. The intensity varies. Well, it'd be like hunger. I guess if we're really, really hungry, we're going to make that a priority. But because it doesn't, and there's many things that enable us to adapt, whether it be a stressful lifestyle, whether it be your body just gets tired of advising you, so it doesn't advise you anymore via pain or medication or other ways, we can actually not give it the credit and recognize how important it is when we should. As you said, that's a great example. I deal with that all the time. A real typical one's this one. Someone's coming along with back pain, and they're going, oh, but, it's not that bad. And you'll go, okay, cool. So think, when was the first time this started? Like, oh, no, not long ago. Like, no, does any sort of low back pain, tell me when the first time you felt it was. Let's say they're 40. They might say when they were 15.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So in that time,
go check that out at some point.
Yeah. How many times have you been in crisis? Oh, back then, quite a bit. You're like, in biology, nothing stays the same. It's either going to get worse or it's either going to get better. And if it's not being corrected, it will get worse.
Yeah. So you mentioned that, one thing to be concerned about is just this, I feel good, right? And we're talking about spine pain. You gave the example of your mother, so happy that she recovered. Uh, is there any kind of testing that you recommend on a regular basis? Just like, well, in hindsight, was your mother experiencing something and ignoring it, right? Like as we've just described. And then, what might you have had your mom do to try and catch that earlier?
Sure. Okay. So let's use her example. She's a smoker. Yeah. And if I was a smoker or if I was doing anything that I consciously knew would be detrimental to a particular tissue in my body, I would test regularly. Okay. Is that a CT? Is it an MRI? I'm not sure. But we've got to be aware of, it's a risk management. We've got to be aware of what's at risk and compensate for that. Okay. Or not compensate, sorry, test for that. Let's imagine we're dealing with a UFC fighter. I've worked with quite a few fighters or someone else who plays contact sports, like rugby. We know how many times they are suffering traumas, okay, during a game or during a match or during a competition, whatever. We've got to give it every certain period of time a couple of things. We've got to get regular maintenance that's not dictated by pain. And we've got to do, I suggest everyone, okay, when they stop growing around the age of 18, let's say, just go and get a simple X-ray, okay? It's low dose radiation, so that's not a deterrent these days. The information we get is just too important to, I guess, have someone cite the fact that there's radiation involved, okay, as a reason not to do it. Because there's that much information. For example, do they have a shorter leg? Would they be prone to a hip problem later on because of that? Do they have some other biomechanical problem? We call it a subluxation in chiropractic occurring that is not degenerative right now, but will be in the future if they don't do something about it. And then lock in with your team of health professionals, okay? So if you have a health fund in Australia, thankfully a lot cover chiro, physio, massage, osteo, acupuncture. Use it regularly. You'll go to the dentist regularly to look after your teeth. So why wouldn't you do the same thing for your spine? So it's that whole preventative thing, but we don't know the importance of prevention unless we are informed, unless we empower ourselves with information from people like myself and people with experience to justify, okay, I will go every year or 2 years to do a scan. I will go to my specialist. I'll go to a chiro this month. I'll go to my physio next month, massage, whatever it is. Please do it now, okay? Because we don't want to see you at 60 or 70 in love, retired, with grandchildren, let's say, ready to really enjoy your life, but limited, sadly limited by an avoidable spinal problem that started way back that you're unaware of because you didn't, have any pain.
So first, I had the great experience. My brother was in Sydney, Australia, so I went to Sydney for 2 weeks. And 2 weeks for me wasn't long enough in Sydney, like just such an amazing city. And if I understood what you said right, the healthcare system in Australia covers massage. So I feel like now I need to move there.
Yeah, private health, yes, private health, not our government Medicare system, which is really good, by the way, like at the state level. But yeah, your private health funds do cover things like that: dentistry, osteopathy, acupuncture.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast. So you've worked with elite athletes. Talk a little bit about that. I think surfers is up there and high performers. And what are some of the kind of key movement principles that they follow that you think the other everyday person should be following?
I've worked with the World Surfing League for 20 years. Okay. And we have, in any demographic, we'll always have those who have, let's say, if they've been lucky enough to suffer an injury earlier in their career, then they know the importance of prevention. That's usually what does it. We're dealing with a younger crew, yeah? So a lot still have that paradigm like, oh, don't touch it if there's nothing to fix yet. That's the way they think because there's no pain. But there's another part of our athletic group there that really understand the importance of performance. So we're not working on a lot of them for pain. We're working to improve performance. And it's beautiful because in surfing, we have, let's say, a 12-day contest window, and there's always lay days. So on those days, over the years, I've worked with people like Kelly Slater and Mick Fanning and Joel Parkinson, Australian athletes that, we're not under the pressure of a competition or a contest, so we can actually work on other things. I can experiment, but everything focused on function and get the feedback from them when they surf. So let's say with surfers, we always surf with the same leg back. Okay, so that's one source of movement, I guess, patterns there that could be incorrect over time. Plus, there's all the maneuvers that we do under force and with speed that can put pressure on, let's say, your knee. You can do an ACL. It's pretty uncommon, but it does happen where you can actually do a maneuver called a float or an avulse the hamstring from the pelvis. So there's injuries like that. And when we work in that situation, it's beautiful because we have often an emergency doctor. We've got a sports doctor, got myself and others where we can, as a team, decide what happens with each surfer. So a very small percentage get injured in contests. A large percentage are asymptomatic or dysfunctional. Okay, so it's good to work with those guys and girls. And another percentage might sort of get injured, feel pain, even traveling on a plane and falling asleep with their head against the side of the plane or sleeping in poor mattresses. So there's a lot involved. That's what I've noticed at this stage of my career in giving the advice around how to protect your spine. So what to do when you're injured, how to protect your spine in day-to-day life, how to sit, how to sleep, all the rest, and other things, which hopefully we'll talk a little bit about, but the importance of diet. Anything that's inflammatory coming from outside in will also go to the weakest point in our body if it is already compromised, and you'll get an exacerbation of the symptoms there. And then the emotional side as well, like we see people who are under stress with their cortisol levels high, which turns out to be pro-inflammatory, are also increasing their other pains and processes in their body due to that fact. Their inflammatory load is higher. So I know there's a lot in that answer, maybe, in regards to athletes.
No, that's good. And I want to go back just a little bit because you talk about have a simple X-ray. I actually have an appointment, my yearly appointment. I have it in my calendar for this week and next week, so I got to figure out which one I need to go to. But so what should I ask for if I'm going to say, hey, I'd like an X-ray full system? Like how do I speak the lingo to my physician?
Full spinal X-ray. That means neck, cervical, dorsal, and lumbar spine, orthostatic or standing. Okay, orthostatic standing. I don't know whether you can see behind me. You might see those two scales there. Hey, those scales cost me $10 a Kmart. Get some scales. Okay, get someone to measure it for you, but you put the outside of one foot, the right foot on the right scale on the outer edge, the left on the outer edge of the left. Look straight ahead. Get somebody to tell you if there's a difference. So that's the first thing I do, and it's very easy to see if you are carrying a difference in weight between the left and the right sides. Can you imagine a lifetime? Okay, my example I'll use, but this is very typical. I had a 6 kilogram difference between the left and right side because my right leg is 6 millimeters shorter than the left. So it's congenital. But it doesn't have to be congenital. It could be due to a fracture. It could be due to a problem in the ankle, the foot, the lower leg or the upper leg or the hip. So there's a lot of things that can end up with you putting more weight on one side than the other. Let's now imagine that you choose a sport that involves you running, let's say, or being in a standing position. Can you imagine how that would compound over time? So that's the first thing. Often when we do that and we do see a difference, that's confirmed in the X-ray because we'll see the pelvis, for example. Here's a little pelvis. Let's imagine on the X-ray we're seeing the right side lower than the left. There's so much information that you can gain if you're working with someone who understands this well before it'll actually ever cause pain or degeneration. We'll also see if there's congenital problems in the spine. Okay, they'll do a lateral, and we'll check out, for example, in a modern world where so many of us from a young age are looking down on phones and laptops, we'll be able to see if the curve of the neck is preserved or not, which is really important. If we lose that curve, it accelerates degeneration and puts a lot of pressure on the brainstem. And one thing I'd like to also highlight, and a lot of people probably realize this already, but our spine has a very challenging task to perform, and that is allowing movement, okay? So it allows movement. At the same time, it needs to protect the nervous system, okay? There's the spinal cord and the nerve roots. So let's imagine the master organ of the nervous system is the brain. It's that important that it's covered and protected by an immobile cranium, which is about 6 millimeters thick. It does a really good job. We've all fallen on our heads and we've bumped our heads and we don't end up with brain damage, okay? Because it's immobile. But can you imagine the challenge of having the electrical component of our body encased in a movable spine, a mobile spine? It's challenging. So they're the things that we'll see on an X-ray, okay? People go, why not an MRI? An MRI we do for a different reason. Firstly, you're lying, so it negates the effects of gravity. We want to see in an X-ray how your body is under the effects of gravity. In an MRI, it'll be more specific and it'll be done, for example, to investigate a disc lesion. So we can actually do little cuts, images through that disc in various angles to see the degree of degeneration. And that might be something that'll happen after your health practitioner sees on an X-ray, well, you know what, we should investigate this further.
All right. So orthostatic, full spinal, and then also kind of really simple at home, 2 scales, and we can you understand the difference. I know at one point I was having calf problems. I continue to have calf problems, but they had identified that one leg was a little bit longer than the other. I think that's very typical. And they gave me an orthotic. I just at one point got rid of it. So I'm excited. Actually, I probably need to go get my spine looked at. There are certainly times, and in fact, this week it came to the top of my mind where I'm like, I don't feel like I have in the past, where I feel like there's more weight on one leg. Like I just feel like there's more weight on one leg, even though I'm clearly standing square. So I'm very glad that I'm having this conversation, and right at the right time. So is that the solution, right? So if you're on the scale, and by the way, you mentioned 4 kilos, that's about 9 pounds for us Americans. That's a substantial amount of weight. If they're off, is this a, I need an orthotic? Is this, hey, let me get to a chiropractor? What do I do if I kind of get that piece of information?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So it's often something that you need to find someone who understands it. So that could and probably should involve a good chiropractor who will adjust, let's say, your hip, your sacroiliac joint and those areas. But most definitely, we're looking also at deep soft tissue massage, myofascial massage, because there's been a whole compensation in those years where that difference has been occurring. So you'll often get, a difference in hypertrophy, let's say hypertrophy in some muscles in the glute on the right side and on the left. Different muscle length. So that's really important in the first phase. So I'm imagining for most people, the first phase is when they're in pain and limitation. Yeah. The second phase is when they've worked with their professionals. Okay. There might be a physio in the mix as well to go over the right sort of exercises. Yeah. Could be acupuncture. Anyway, once they're out of that first phase, they're out of it because they're still in limitation, but they are out of pain. And that's phase 2. So in phase 2, you can become more self-sufficient. It's more autonomous here. You go and do your yoga, you do your Pilates, you do your foundation training. And then, because we know that these problems are built up over time. So we have to be patient with the fact that it will take time to undo them. And you've got to give your body the conditions to do so. It's similar to putting braces on your teeth. No one puts braces on their teeth and expects them to do their job in a week. So why would they expect any health practitioner who works with the spine to do their magic in a week, a month, or whatever? It does take time. The good news is they're out of pain fast if they're symptomatic. But they need to remember, we need to think, we can't think, everyone's got a difference, or 4 kilos is normal. No, it's common, but it's not normal. Heart attack is common, but it's not normal. So if we want to really be looking ahead, and that's what the way I encourage everyone to think, how do you want to be living your life in your 60s, 70s, and 80s? That's the investment. Okay, and when we talk about investment, there's just two little things I would like to say that, and this blew me away when I heard this. Firstly, Harvard did a study years ago, in the last decade, that showed that any investment in health gives a 2,000% return on their money. So people jumping up and down these days about crypto and, gold and real estate, look at the return compared to a 2,000% return on your money if you're investing in health. And that's not just money, it's also time. Okay? We can't have this out of sight, out of mind attitude. And the other one is, and this is probably more important, 90 to 95% of the money, okay, of all that we'll invest in our health in our lifetime is done. It's not invested, by the way, it's spent in the last 5% of our life, which is sad, meaning that it's crisis, it's emergency, expenditure, not investment, and we won't survive. Okay, so that would be typically, we all know cases where someone's diagnosed, all the money goes to that at that time, and unfortunately, it didn't result in anything. Number one cause of bankruptcy, health bills, medical bills. You know what I mean? So there's enough there for us to go, no, you know what? I don't need convincing. This is the best investment ever.
Yeah, I think a 2,000% return on money, it especially makes sense in the context of a man with his health has 1,000 dreams. A man without his health has just one.
Yes.
And so like invest in that. Let's talk a little bit about movement. Like what does movement play in injury prevention, and potentially recovery? And are there simple things that people can be doing in their daily lives?
Yeah. So really important. Movement's so important. Think about the importance of movement on every level. I always use the example of a dog who's happy on a farm, brought into a city in a small area. It's not a happy dog. So we've got to understand that movement affects our mental health, it affects our serotonin levels. But as far as the spine and biomechanical problems are concerned, it is absolutely crucial. Okay, we need to be moving. Too many of us suffer problems because we're not moving enough. So my rule is move well when you move. Support your spine well when you're not moving. Okay, if you follow those two rules, excellent. So let's look at the simplest intervention first, and that would be walking. Now, as a runner back in the day, God, if I could turn back time, I would not run. I would not have run because I know how detrimental that is now. But as a runner, as someone who always equated benefit from exercise with suffering, to have spinal surgery and be forced to only walk, that was one of the biggest gifts that I got from spinal surgery, because I walk now every week at least 3 to 4 times long distances. Yeah, and I walk in nature, barefoot, I get all the grounding effects and all the rest. So walking is incredible. So anyone's aim right now, if they're in crisis, is to get themselves to the point where they're walking. And understandably, that might take a couple of weeks. There's a full protocol around this. I mean, what I was going to say online, I've detailed phase 1, 2, 3. I've got my exercises there. So people have access to this information. There's an incredible online course in regards to spinal care. But I really go into the fact that it's got to be structured. There's a whole process of things we need to do when we're in crisis. Let's say there's a lot of people right now listening to this. They're at home, they're in bed, they can't move. Okay, they shouldn't be in bed, they should be on the floor. But you have to rest the body, but also introduce movement gradually. It's a little bit like leaving a bicycle in a shed and not touching the pedals for a while, they rust. You wouldn't come along and force it, but what you would do is put some oil there, and bit by bit, you're going to regain that function. It's the same with our spine. You're doing the right things, you're using medication when you need it, which is definitely important at the start for a lot of people, but you've got to break the cycle that's keeping you in a situation where you're not moving. If we can get you to be walking 20 minutes per day or 2 or 3 times a day, fantastic. Look, I've often got people in crisis that as soon as I can, I've got them walking twice a day for an hour. Okay? And it's like a miracle. honestly, people will come back to me and I'll say the same thing. I didn't rate walking, and now I do. Now I can recognize how important it is. So, movement, that's your most basic form of movement. What we do then is, let's say people are accustomed to working out in gym. Too many people make the mistake of having a crisis, dealing with temporary pain relief, and jumping in to the same level of weights that they were using before. We've got to understand that muscle fibers, okay, a bit like this, they're composed of microfibers, and when they're healthy, look at that, they contract and relax beautifully. However, when we have chronic problems, especially, but a lot of spinal problems and joint, some of these fibers will be disorganized. So when I say disorganized, when you look at them like that, that's really well organized. But let's imagine when they're disorganized, some are here, there's fat interspersed within the microfibers. That's an unstable muscle. So if we go back to try and strengthen an unstable muscle, it will perpetuate dysfunction. This is why it's so important to do your deep soft tissue work. We've got to remember that all the muscle fibers we're born with, we keep. They're not like other cells that replicate. So we need to care for them. Yeah, and we need to do the necessary work after. So you're getting in doing your deep soft tissue work, your muscle work at the start. Then when you're ready to continue the stabilization process, you do your yoga, your Pilates, your foundation. When you're ready, that will equate to when you have those fibers organized. Great. Go back to gym, start slowly. So just go through the movements, but with lighter weights. Okay. Too many people, as I said, they go back to their normal weight. So there's a full process. And often, if we work with a personal trainer as our only health specialist, well, often we're not getting the right advice. Often, once again, too many people have this thought process that equates benefit with suffering, and it shouldn't be like that at all.
Interesting. So I have been saying, and maybe this is wrong, I've been kind of describing to people, well, one, let's work with human psychology first, which is you got to be moving, but through a lesson I won't get into right now, I realized that moving less was actually more beneficial, right? So, and the way I think about it is, if thinking about walking 10 or you suggested 20 minutes a day causes you to not walk, stop thinking about it. Just do 5 minutes, right? And if that gets you to 10, great. But if thinking about doing 10 stops you, don't do it. And if you're walking 5 minutes a day, that's 35 minutes a week. 5 minutes a day is better than 35 minutes one day a week, right? So to get out there and do it. So to kind of slow things down. It took me a long time. I played semi-professional soccer. So for me, like training was always a 3-mile run. It was never anything less than that. And what I realized kind of in the pandemic, my wife was going out for 2-mile jogs. And then I was like, well, I can do that, right? Like, so I broke it down by shortening my exercise routine. I actually increased the frequency and ultimate distance of the exercise. And it's interesting. I'm lucky that I had back surgery so that I was forced to walk. I just interviewed Brad Kearns, who just wrote a book called Born to Walk, right? There was a book called Born to Run, super famous. Now he's written Born to Walk. He was a kind of an elite and extreme athlete, triathlete, and really is talking like we need to be walking. And it's taken me a while to slow down. So I'm glad you're sharing that message. And maybe you have some more to add.
I was just going to say the obvious that back in the day, in Paleolithic times, we would have walked. We didn't go for moderate intensity, long duration runs. So we're born to sprint, rarely, or walk. Okay, so walking, there's a whole lot of, we could have a whole podcast on this, but we lose so much benefit and potential benefit by running. It puts us into another phase of stress where the body upregulates the deposition of fat because it puts it into a stressful state. The body thinks it needs to prepare for a survival situation. So losing weight, walking, okay? It's with cortisol levels elevated from running, they turn pro-inflammatory as opposed to keeping them lower, or the times that they come up as they should in a spike level, it's anti-inflammatory. So there's all these processes that are actually different when we do run, okay? And once again, we do it so much, we get the runner's high. But look, all I can remember is pain, common headaches, and being less productive after running than what I am when I do other forms of exercise or walking. So the book Born to Walk, for example, fantastic. We need to be looking at that and changing it as early as possible. Okay. Or incorporating our new running as sprints. Go to the beach, go to a park, churn out your high intensity, 8 sprints, 30-second sprints, happy days. You've stimulated your type 2 muscle fibers. They're the ones responsible for the secretion of growth hormone. 50% of our fibers are type 2. So why wouldn't we do fast twitch? There's not many sports that do that, but we can still run. It just needs to be really fast and more intense.
I was on a walk. Great part of the story. A guy commented on my shirt in our neighborhood, and I stopped and chatted with him, and I recommended to him sprinting. He was coming off of a 6-mile run. It's like, you really should be sprinting. Like that's the right thing. One of the things that's amazing for me about sprinting when I started picking it up again was it just feels so youthful. Like the process of like opening up and actually sprinting just feels so youthful. Like it feel like the kid who's running through the field for absolutely no reason. They actually are doing it for a reason. They don't know, and you don't know exactly why. And it feels amazing. And I like the idea of, cutting down you actually do less workout and do better work for your body. So, this has been fantastic. I've got some wrap-up questions, and then we'll ask like how people can contact you. I know this is a little off topic for you, but we are a longevity podcast. So Jason, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
Look, target age for me is more a target, I guess, stage of life, still practicing everything I love. Okay, which is surfing and not being limited. And thankfully, I can tell anyone listening, at 55, due to my functional medicine as well and what I've learned, feel more energetic than what I did at 30. So I don't believe following everything that I'm doing, that will change. It doesn't have to change. But look, I know we speak and we listen to people like Dave Asprey, and he's got like 180 on his installers. That'd be great. I like this rationale. We see so many people passing away, let's say in their late 70s and 80s, that have had terrible habits their whole lives. They've smoked their whole lives, they've drunk alcohol regularly, they haven't done much exercise. So with a bare minimum or zero of effort, they're making it to that age. So I'd imagine these days, if we've got everything in place the way we're doing, 110 to 120 for sure. I see that as totally obtainable. If we look after our joints, we've got to remember, physiologically, everything else can be great. But if we have stuff wearing out that can't be replaced, it might be difficult because we need movement. Movement for me is one of the most important, if not the most important nutrient after sleep.
So 110, is that how long you think humans can live? And is that your goal? Or would we separate those two into two things?
My goal is 110, 120. I think, if you're lucky enough to be aware of the importance of grounding, the zeta potential in red blood cells, how to oxygenate, most importantly in this modern world, how to keep your cortisol levels low, and there are ways to do that, okay, and avoid, the detrimental effects that happen when they're higher. Good diet. For me, working with functional medicine and health since the health food store days, it's come back to the simple things. So what I'm really aware of now is not daunting anyone, saying, buy yourself a hyperbaric chamber. I have one. They're unreal. Get yourself PMF. All great. But you've got simple interventions to give you the same thing at a weaker dose. Incorporate in your life regularly. It's all about routine, isn't it? And repetition.
Excellent. And we're running a little short on time, so a little rapid fire. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts to longevity and a long health span that you would share?
Okay, in a world where we are becoming aware bit by bit about the importance of supplementation, and good nutrition, give yourself more time to focus on the removal of toxins. Not enough people do that. I feel after me having severe mercury toxicity, and this is a lot of the things in life are luck. I didn't know that it put me in this situation now, but I think why I'm feeling like this and still functioning the way I do is due to the fact that I was forced to focus on regular chelation. Okay, I've done regular coffee enemas for the last 15 years. Okay, I didn't know it'd have this effect, but I do see clearly now that most of us aren't focusing on that. Your saunas, good hydration is really important, all the things to get those toxins out. 2, movement. Okay, we've talked about it in the podcast. It's pretty obvious, I hope. Go and learn more about it. Get out there moving. You know, if it's only 5 minutes, start with that. If you can only support yourself against the wall or lift your knees up, start there. Okay, and visualize. Visualization is really important as a mindset. If you're not in a situation right now, look to where you can be, and you know you can be. Work with the right people. Be inspired by the right people, and don't be affected by the negative ones, okay? The half full, the glass is half full ones. That's a really important thing as well.
And maybe one thing that you think people are getting absolutely wrong regarding a long health span and longevity.
What they're getting wrong, one thing, the first thing that comes to mind for those of you who exercise is that you can train off a bad diet. You can't. Okay, if you're not looking at your inflammatory levels from all sources, no, we can't expect longevity if we're still thinking like that. And alcohol, unfortunately for some, fits in that group.
Absolutely. And how can people contact you?
Okay, best way would be on Instagram, Jason Gilbert Official. My website, jasongilbert.com.au. And I'll also say on that website, there is a book that I've just released about post-spinal surgery care. Because when I had spinal surgery, guess what? There's nothing out there. I was told 3 things of what not to do when there's a whole lot of stuff we can do to be proactive. And I've had quite a few people, actually from podcasts in the States, reach out, and I help them through their post-spinal surgery process. So it inspired me to write a book on it.
Excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
What am I excited about in the near future? Definitely getting more ebooks out there. Okay, I like this format of just putting my information, my knowledge down in an easy to assimilate way. Education on a wider level, and getting, having it very obvious I'll make it to 110, 120 through the practices that I'm doing every day.
I love it. All right. So you can find him, jasongilbert.com.au, right? Correct me if I get anything wrong here. IG, Jason Gilbert Official. And you can find an ebook, Post-Spinal Care. Is that it? About post-spinal care?
Yeah, it's called Stronger Every Day. It's on my site. I haven't put it on Amazon yet. It's called Stronger Every Day. Oh, sorry.
Stronger Every Day.
Stronger than ever.
Stronger than ever.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I have a nutrition one called Stronger Every Day. They'll find on the site.
All right. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Chris, thank you very much, mate. It was epic. Loved it.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.